All right, guys. So we're back. As I was mentioning, so the same year, 1619, that the House of Burgesses is created, and we also have the first Dutch slave ship that lands off of or anchors off the coast of Virginia, and about 20 slaves from Africa are brought onto or into the Virginia colony, into Jamestown. And this is certainly slavery. I'm not trying to say that it's not in any way, but it's important to understand that um, slavery at this time, at the beginning, was not fully developed yet. This idea of um, racism was not completely developed yet. It was still a developing idea during this time, and so sometimes slaves were able to gain their freedom. They certainly were looked at as being inferior to their white counterparts, even if compared to the white indentured servants. But again, they had a little bit more mobility. And we're going to see later on, especially I believe in chapter 3 of American Yacht, where we're really going to solidify this institution of slavery. And people are going to, generations of families are going to be bound to this system. And so yeah, just kind of making note of that. So war and disease had really devastated the Chesapeake Indians that Mr. Briere had mentioned. About 10,000 members are part of the Powhatan Nation, and disease really just wipes a lot of them out, as we saw a little bit in chapter 1 with the Columbian Exchange and the spread of old world diseases amongst new world populations. And then here we just have an indentured servant contract. And so I don't know if Mr. Briere wants to add a little bit more info on that, but it's kind of interesting to check out.
Yeah, we'll be taking a closer look at indentured servant contracts probably in class this week. But so we'll touch a little bit more on that. But here's just an example of an advertisement trying to get people to sign up as an indentured servant. So we're going to take a look at a couple of case studies of colonization in the New World with two groups. I'll be talking about the Pilgrims. In 1620, the Pilgrims negotiate with the Virginia Company. The Pilgrims, who are eventually going to obviously land at Plymouth Rock, famously. They were originally supposed to be going to Virginia, but a storm and poor navigation knocks them off course, and so they end up in Massachusetts, in the New England, the northern part of the east coast of what is today the United States. And so the Pilgrims established the Mayflower Compact. And this is an agreement to establish a government. Now, the important thing about the Mayflower Compact, again, we are dealing with the first forms of organized government in the colonies. So just like the House of Burgesses was a way for the people in the Chesapeake to run their day-to-day government, the Mayflower Compact was the same thing. We're not talking about revolutions or the Constitution or anything like that. We'll get there. But for right now, the Mayflower Compact, one of the tenets of it that is going to be carried on throughout the colonies, and we will see in the American Revolution and carried farther into modern American history, is this idea of the will of the majority, in that they would make their decisions based on a popular vote. Now, it's important to note that the people making the decisions, it's not the entire population of the Pilgrims coming to the New World. It's mostly men, and it's mostly the wealthier men or landowning men later that are making these decisions. But this idea of the majority decision and a majority rule is something that the Pilgrims don't invent, but it is something that's going to take root in New England. And as we see when we talk about areas like Boston during the American Revolution, a lot of the foundation of that comes from this idea that the people in that area are the ones who should be making the decisions. Now, Plymouth grows into a small, successful colony, and it'll eventually be absorbed by the Massachusetts Bay Colony. But the Pilgrims, who are contemporaries of Jamestown, they're coming to the New World at about the same time. They have a much easier go of it, relatively speaking. There's still going to be death and famine, but compared to the Chesapeake counterparts, they are significantly more successful in their colonization of Plymouth.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the Puritans. And so as Mr. Briere mentioned, the Pilgrims, although it seems significant, like we hear a lot about it when we're growing up, the number of pilgrims, quote unquote, that were labeled as such, was much smaller as compared to the Puritans. And so the Puritans, as you know from the reading, gained their name because they wanted to purify the Church of England from its Catholic ways and try to get away from Catholic traditions as much as possible. And so in 1630, we have large, in the 1620s, late 1620s, 1630s, we have large numbers of Puritans that are migrating from England. About 20,000 are going to make this great migration across the Atlantic Ocean and trying to find a space where they're not persecuted. Because they wanted to purify the Church of England, obviously they had a lot of enemies, amongst people that did not want them to, completely rid the church of these customs that a lot of people were used to. And it's important to note that although the Puritans wanted to purify the Church of England from Catholic ways, they really advocated kind of a middle ground. They were not, they did not see themselves as like being the most spiritual, the most pure, or anything like that. And so they certainly engaged in numerous activities that you read about in the reading. So John Winthrop famously argues that he wants the Puritans to establish in the New World, in North America, a city on a hill, a beacon of light, to show, our ideas are legitimate. If we break away from the ideas of the Catholic Church, then this is what we can, these are the dreams that we can realize. And so Winthrop really, establishes his control. And as Mr. Vieira mentioned, Winthrop was one of those more wealthy landowning men, and for a lot of intentions, he really kind of ruled with an iron fist in many ways. Only Puritan men were allowed to be freemen, so Puritan women are not enjoying the political liberties or economic liberties of other people in England or in the Puritan communities, and about 2/5 of the population was allowed to vote. So again, we're starting to see these seeds of democracy, these seeds of popular will and self-determination, but it's not full-blown, let's cut the king's head off or anything like that. So here we could just see where people were leaving England and where they were going in the New World, and then the inset shows kind of where the Puritans went more specifically. So yeah, we'll talk much more about how to break down maps and migration patterns throughout the course.
All right, just finishing up here. We got a couple more minutes left. Try and keep these down to just 3 parts if we can. So life in New England. Now, context is important, and compared to the Chesapeake region, New England colonists did do much better, but there's still disease, there's still starvation. The New England colonists were able to build relationships better with Native Americans, and actually in a lot of cases, and I believe we look at this in chapter 3 a little bit closer, they're able to build and play on rivalries that Native American tribes had with one another in order to strengthen relationships that they had to get better access to food, to get better access to land. And so in New England, when you compare it to the Chesapeake, as Mr. Eskridge said, many of the colonists coming to Virginia were adventure seekers. They're seeking profit. They're seeking wealth. In New England, people are coming in family groups. Now, that's important because when you are coming with family, you are coming to set up shop. You're coming for long term. You're not coming to look for an opportunity to get rich and send money back home or return home to England and buy some land yourself. You're looking to establish a community. And with New England, you see family groups come over and you see communities really start to form. The town hall meeting, which is something that even still today in 2019 has value in American politics, you begin to see that in New England politics and groups holding these town hall meetings to discuss issues that are important to them. Now, the Puritans, who were a religious group, they turn to be a kind of our way or the highway type of group. And nonconformists, people like Roger Williams, who wanted to actually pay Native Americans for their land, which is a crazy idea to most people at the time. Yeah, nuts. And Anne Hutchinson, they would be banished from the Massachusetts Bay Colony into smaller colonies, primarily one which is known today as Rhode Island, which was started as Rogue Island for those people who had gone rogue. So here you see a breakdown of the different colonies, and we'll take a closer look at this in class.
Peace.